Welcome to Guy Code, a podcast dedicated to imparting dad wisdom to my son, with your host, Koji Steven Sakai, and friends.
Welcome. My name is Koji Steven Sakai, and you're listening to Guy Code episode number 24. I remember in college, there was a moment where all of my friends were my ex-girlfriends or girlfriends, I guess, and I couldn't realize. And after a while, I realized that was going to be a problem. So I made it a point to actually start to find a lot more guy friends or people I just wouldn't date ever. This is something I should have realized a lot earlier in my life. I needed to do a better job of establishing healthy relationships with people I was going to date at some point. And so that's probably one of my biggest regrets, was that I kind of lost touch with a lot of my earlier guy friends because I was so kind of just focused on hanging out with women. So to help me kind of talk about this, I brought in my writing partner and friend, Kim Noonan. Hi, Kim.
Hey, what's up?
Nothing much. How are you?
I'm good.
Kim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
A little bit about me. I was born in Vietnam, brought over here as an infant to an all-American white family, and now writing and directing stuff, and teach at a community college as well. I teach ESL and adult education in the community college and at LUSD, along with the writing stuff. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome.
Now.
Actually, the one question I have for you that I've been meaning to ask you, but I'm just going to do it now because I've been meaning to ask you. So Noonan is not a super common last name. And did you know the co-pilot of Amelia Earhart's was a Noonan? You're not related to that co-pilot, are you?
I'm not.
Okay.
But yeah, the only reason why Noonan became infamous was because of Caddyshack.
Yeah, but you know that you do know that the co-pilot.
No, I don't. I've heard. No, tell me. Do you have the story?
Yeah. The co-pilot who was allegedly, I think he was a drunkard, but he was the co-pilot of Amelia Earhart, the one that when she died on that flight that she died in. He was the co-pilot, and his last name was Noonan.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, so every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, I gotta talk to Kim. I gotta ask him.
More blame on the Noonans. Noonan. Now we're responsible for Amelia Earhart. Get more worse.
In Caddyshack, there was a Noonan as well.
Oh yeah, man. So Caddyshack with Rodney Dangerfield, the main character was Danny Noonan. And when he would go putt, everyone around would go, Noonan. So when I would do free throws in high school, people would do the same thing to me. They did it to all my brothers and sisters. So, yeah.
That's hilarious. All right. Well, let's get into kind of the advice. We're going to talk about kind of creating healthy relationships and kind of advice around that. And this was your idea. So why don't you get us started? Why don't you tell us your first advice around creating healthy advice?
Well, I don't know I have advice, but it stems from a very astute comment my friend told me when we were in high school. And there were these guys that were just complete idiots. And you're still affiliated with idiots in high school because you're part of them too. And even though we didn't hang out with them that much, but they always were just assholes to each other and just belittled each other and ridiculed each other. And I had friends like that too, that our whole relationship was pretty much constituted by just belittling each other. And I remember my friend saying, I don't know if those guys have a real relationship when they just belittled each other the whole time. And that's always made me realize, with my little nephews and nieces, what kind of relationships they're going to have. Because, we, even as adults, we still make fun of each other. We tease each other, and that's fine. But I think at a very early age, it's important to really develop healthy relationships with your friends that you could share stuff with, and not just listen. You're always going to make fun of each other, and that's fun and all, but to the point where it gets personal, and it does sometimes. And and that's just the foundation of how your relationship works. That's the pattern. It just doesn't seem, if it starts that early, it's going to continue on later on.
That's really great and interesting. I wonder though if things have changed a lot since we were kids. I think guyness has changed so much, I think. And right, because back in the day you couldn't be gay, for example.
Has it?
I think it has. I mean, like,
with younger people, I just don't know enough because I don't really talk to a lot of
like babies,
high school kids. I mean, I talk to my nephew.
No, but like the guys aren't holding hands or anything. I'm not saying that, but I think there's a lot more like there's a lot more feelings. There's a lot more like when we were kids, it was hard to express one of the reasons I liked hang out with women more than guys was that it was like every time I hung out with guys, we're just kind of making fun of each other. It was everything was super athletic or super competitive, and I mean, although we were friends, it didn't feel like I was hanging out with friends. I couldn't just sit and talk to them about what I'm thinking.
That's exactly the kind of relationships I'm talking about. Right. I had a lot of women friends too. But I think these kids they have much more information, especially about their emotional well-being than we did. I mean, a lot of these kids have like a psychiatrist at school or they go to, and they're not afraid to tell their friends to go. And they're not afraid of the definition of the idea of vulnerability because it's so out there now for these kids. Yeah. So maybe they do. I just don't know. It'd be interesting to personally, find out.
Well, it is really interesting because like, even when I talk to my son, like part of our banter is we go back and forth to make fun of each other. And it's kind of, it drives my wife crazy. And I kept trying to explain to her that this is how guys talk. But listening to you, I'm starting to think maybe that's not all we do. We don't just make fun of each other, obviously. I'm his father, but
no, me and my brother do all the time. That's the foundation of a lot of my relationships, even with my brothers.
But I wonder if how much of that's changed and how much that's interesting because when I look at when I look at young men and stuff, they're a lot more emotional than they were like when I remember being a kid. And it's a lot like people are a lot more open. I mean, just the fact that you could be gay now is super different, right? I mean,
I was talking about that with a friend of mine, and because we're in our 40s, and we were talking about how, like, with the Black Lives Matter and these kids, they grew up with an entirely different narrative of diversity and gay marriage and stuff like that. Yeah. Like, I certainly didn't grow up with that. We were critical if you were gay or you were that, or you were made fun of. It just was, that stuff just wasn't not acceptable at all. Even among adults for the most part.
Well, even the idea of being considered doing something quote gay was seen as a negative thing, right?
Yes.
Like you could, and so I mean now I think that's probably different because it's such a, although one piece of advice I had from in 7th grade, I was in a prep school, and one of my teachers kept telling me and my friends that homophobia was very unattractive because I'm sure I said something about being gay or something, right? And I remember like thinking that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard at that time. But it's the one thing I remember from 7th grade is my teacher telling me that homophobia is very unattractive. And it's like, it's amazing that, it's been like over 25 years since that. And I still think about that she said that to me. And I don't even remember what I said or what my fellow classmates said, but that it was such a, it was so pervasive in growing up about being straight and being manly.
It totally makes an impression on you moving forward about how you carry yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it totally does. But I also think in healthy relationships, it's not only, it's with your friends and you hung out with girlfriends too, but it's also with the teachers you have around you, the coaches you have around you, and just to learn how to, I had a job when I was in high school, and you have to learn how to deal with people that are totally different than you, because that stuff does come back, I think. And especially, moving into college when you're just trying to find yourself, I wish I would have gotten more involved so I could start developing relationships, because I think I'm not trying to segue to this yet, but there's not one job that I have gotten that hasn't involved someone I know. I've gotten it as a result of knowing somebody.
Yeah. You can segue.
Exactly. Okay, but segue. No, but I mean, like, so how is your son, like, does he, like, my little nephew, one of my older nephews, doesn't have a lot of friends. And he's just that way. He's such an individual. But how's your son, and does he have a lot of friends?
My son is interesting because I know it drives my wife crazy a little bit because he doesn't have that like one best friend that he's like riding or
Mhm.
dying for. And I've seen
Right.
him. Honestly, I'm probably his best friend. Right now, especially, we spend all our time together. But I think the biggest thing for me is that he's able to kind of go from different groups. Like I see him hang out in one group, and then he kind of like goes in another group and hangs out with another group. So I think that's good because he's able to kind of go back and forth a little bit. But it is
Yeah.
interesting because for me, it's like when I was his age, I had like two friends that were my best friends, and we did every single thing together. We played all our sports together. We did Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts together. We went on family vacations together. And he doesn't really have that, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. But what do you think? Why'd you ask me? I forget.
Well, if he had friends,
Oh, he has
how
friends.
is he
Yeah.
with making relationships and developing friends? I guess, but
Oh,
it sounds. I think he sounds like he's going from different groups to different groups. So he's
yeah.
trying to just figure out either where he fits in, or he just is, maybe is he kind of a curious kid and just wants to get
Yeah.
a feel for everybody?
Yeah, I think actually it's interesting because I see he's able to make friends wherever he goes, I think, but he's also able to like kind of, he doesn't get attached to really any kind of situation, and he kind of does what he wants, which is both positive and negative, I think. But like I said, I think I'm probably his best friend at this point, especially the last like what 6 months, 5 months, 4 months since this whole thing has started,
Right.
where I'm like his only friend around, obviously.
So,
Um,
just curious, how is this COVID having to be always inside? I mean, like, in regards to relationship with your son, I mean, how's he doing? I can't imagine going through this as a kid.
um, I mean, we don't stay inside the whole time. He's outside a lot. I don't know if I've told you, but we're trying to do we're running a lot right now, and I'm trying to
Yeah,
get him
well,
5K under 30 is our goal. So every day we're running, and he's doing jujitsu and everything. But it's challenging, I think, because so much of school, like for example, his homeschooling is better than his schooling. But the biggest thing about school is that interpersonal, like learning about stuff, learning about yourself in relation to other people, learning about how to deal with teachers you don't like. Like I think one of the best lessons of school is dealing with a teacher you hate, right? Because that's going to be your life. You're going to have a boss you
yeah,
hate.
or just has a philosophy that just doesn't vibe with you. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of teachers who are good teachers but the way
Or,
their philosophy is how they teach may not
or
be.
even they might just hate you. I mean, I think it's really positive just to be like, all right, this person just hates me. And how do you navigate that? Because you're gonna run into that situation where somebody, you open your mouth, no matter what you do or say, they just hate you for some reason.
Yes.
Part of that is just having to navigate, and then also just girls and liking girls, and that whole thing. It's like you can't get that at homeschool.
Right, and those are all life lessons that they have to learn on their own.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's like what I've thought about this whole time. Like this whole COVID thing's like I'm really big on putting all the resources we can now so kids could go back to school.
yeah, yeah.
And I've always just been curious. Like my little nephews seem like they're doing okay. They Zoom with their friends,
But it's not the same though.
but they know it's not the same. And
Yeah,
like a lot of my friends who do have kids, they're just kind of like, yeah, it's a little weird.
yeah. But that's why for me, to me, it's a good time for him and I to talk and to share and to really push him for things. Like one of the things relevant to this conversation, one of the things I always tell him is, that if somebody doesn't appreciate you, they shouldn't be in your life. There shouldn't be anybody in your life that doesn't appreciate like I say music, because that's I think we're all music. And I think if they don't appreciate your lyrics and who you are, they shouldn't be in your life.
Right.
And the last guest, actually, the guest before you, the one right before you, he's a superintendent over at Linwood. And he said, the people you surround yourself with are really, really important. Because if you have a bunch of people who are pushing you to be better, you're going to be a better person. If you have people that are lower than you and pushing you to do bad things, you're going to do bad things. And he said that's, oh, he didn't say this part, but I really do think that that's an indicator of the kind of person you are, is the kind of people you have around you.
Yes. And I think that goes back to like with the relationships we were talking about. If you have a friend, that doesn't like your lyrics and you're just hanging out with him so he'll eventually like you because of lyrics, that they have to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
That those, whatever you have in you of insecurity, because we all want to, like, look, I grew up being really, from maybe it's the adoption thing or whatever, just eager to fucking people please and eager for a sense of belonging. And I think that's invaluable to learn, that if someone doesn't appreciate you for who you are, it's okay to let them go out of your life, because they don't add value to it.
Yeah.
They're not adding value to relationship, and you should be, as an individual, so eager to get their validation, because they're not, even though, and you want it, but you got to find that, like that superintendent says, that crowd, that group that gets you and that does make you stronger and does empower you. And I think it is hard earlier. Again, I don't know what these kids, I'm sure it's different with these kids now. Maybe it's not, but I'm sure they deal with the same kind of things we did. They certainly have to.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, do you have other pieces of advice around this, or?
Yeah. I mean, I think when you go to college or when you graduate college, it's really important not to fuck around for like 5 years. No, it happens a lot. It happened to me. It happened to a lot of my friends. And I think it's important to get involved and start developing relationships, do internships, find, if you're a writer, find writers groups. Like, you don't have to do everything alone and by yourself. And to find out what you like later, because it's going to cost you down the road. And I think developing relationships early on is going to be invaluable for where you are later, for people hiring you, for you meeting their friends, and just meeting different people, because those work relationships are eventually become personal relationships. Like you and I were eventually just writing buddies, or we just met at a film festival, and slowly but surely we became friends. We were writing, but we became friends as a result of that, started hanging out more, and you start trusting people more. You become, you start talking about your family life more, and that's where the good comes from. That's where all the good qualities start coming, of that define a good, healthy relationship. When you've got someone's support, you're supporting other people, and you start caring about other people than yourself. You start caring about the relationship.
Yeah. This is one of my big pet peeves when I talk to my classes at the different places I teach. I always tell them, don't waste your time. You have to start getting internships now. You have to start meeting people now. Go get and start networking. I know you think you're going to be in college forever, but you got to start now. You got to get out there. You got to start being places. You got to start meeting people. And of course, nobody ever listens to me. But ultimately, that's what
you do feel like the old parent that's like, oh my God, I'm not getting through to these guys.
Yeah, actually,
and I can attest that. I didn't start doing films till later, and even when I was doing stuff creative, I was still resistant to going out there and meeting people, because like networking had this like bad connotation to it. Like you're brown nosing, or it's so lame, you're just kissing everybody's ass. No, it's really good to go out and meet other personalities and see what kind of people they are. They're even execs, they're people, and and people that that are a little bit bigger, they're good people, and you want to get to know them, not just because of to get yourself further, but it helps you evolve.
Yeah, and actually, to go back to your idea about relationships and people, one of the big things about sociopaths, for example, is that they flame out in their 40s, and the reason they flame out in their 40s is because at some point in a person's career, they need somebody that will say this person is good. Somebody will vouch for them in order to take that next step in their career, whether it's to go become a vice president or become CEO or to become anything of a higher position. You need a person that's like, Kim is a great person. I will vouch for him. Maybe not in those literal words, but one of the challenges with the sociopaths is that by the time they're in the 40s, they've burned so many bridges and they've ruined so many relationships because they by nature of who they are, they don't have a relationship. by the time they get to 40, they burned it all. And so because of that, they're no longer like, they can't take that next step in their career. And when they don't take that next step in their career, what happens is it starts to burn down their relationships, their personal relationships and their families. And so what you find is a lot of in the 40s, these sociopaths start to fall apart. Because we think of sociopaths like serial killers and stuff, but most sociopaths are like PE teachers or lawyers or something. But a lot of times their
no, I
careers
know a
burn
person
down, right?
in my family who, among our family tree, not immediate family, but outside that, like where something like that happened, and they're having narcissistic sociopathic qualities where they're constantly blaming, and they never let you know. And you're right, it happened in his 40s, and I've seen that happen to some other people. And
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. Maybe all those unresolved issues just become a volcano or something.
A lot of times it's like you just need, like you're talking about, you just need relationships, and a lot of it comes down to a relationship. I mean, you know, the story I always say about the first screenplay contest I won was because, you know, I met this guy. I met the founder of this festival, and he really liked me, and we started talking, and he read my script, and he really liked the script, and he pushed it to the finals because of my relationship with him, and because of just he liked the script. But it was that personal relationship, you know, gets you over the top. Or even, you know, when I became vice president of the museum, it was because of my relationship with the president. That without that kind of a good relationship, I would never be able to take another step forward, you know, in your career ultimately. And I think it comes down to what we're talking about, creating these kinds of strong relationships early helps you develop these stronger relationships later, right?
Yes. And I think like the example you gave about when you worked at the museum, and because you talked to the president, it used to be like, oh, you know, you're talking to the president or whatever. No, that's like, you want to talk to the higher people to pick their brain to see how everything functions. And more importantly, when they start trusting you and then you move up, that's a really big thing. And I think it's no different than if I knew someone that needed a writer with your kind of material, and I recommend you. And I think we forget about this. If I recommend you, I'm putting my own integrity or my own kind of reputation on the line. Yeah. I'm not just going to do it for someone that's, you know, flimsy and not reliable. I think that's what it comes down to, is that I'm referring you because I trust you. You've been reliable, and that you could be dependent. And that's a huge quality. It's like I'm sorry, but like being someone that's unpredictable, you really don't want to work with later.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying about sociopaths, is that if you got a friend who's a sociopath, you're not going to make that recommendation. You're not going to vouch for this person. And because you're not going to vouch for this person, they're not going to be able to take that step forward in their career and in their lives. But yeah, I think this is really interesting. Do you have any other pieces of advice around creating strong?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the same stuff that we discuss can go into, you know, the type of girls he meets as well, especially the one that doesn't understand your lyrics too. So understand healthy relationships when you're younger, when you're in college. Cause in college, like everyone screws up and makes so many mistakes. Like I know I did. And it is important to treat people really well. And you're going to be, I think it's kind of the culture maybe you and I grew up with, of being in college, getting drunk, and there wasn't a Me Too back then. There wasn't a lot of dialogue in terms of how women felt. And now that these kids have that information, I'm hoping that they're going to be, you know, treat women and treat how they develop relationships will be a lot more authentic.
I hope so. I don't know if that's going to be the case.
Right.
Although these kids, you know, the younger generation is
you don't think it's feasible in college? Yeah, it's hard.
Well, they're having less sex. I mean, you know, they're at every generation since generation.
I don't know
ever since the baby boomers, we've gone down in sex, we've gone down in abortions, we've gone down in drug use and TV time. That generation, don't even get me started. That was the generation that kind of started off. We could do an offline conversation about my rant against that generation. But yeah, these kids, I mean, it is interesting though with girls and stuff. I always tell my son that, you know, first of all, don't chase, because that's going to make them not like you. If you don't chase, they're going to like you more. And anyway, if you're more successful, they're going to like you anyway. So wait till you're successful, and then don't try to try really hard. And that ultimately girls are just boys without penises. And you just need to think of it that way, that they're not like that like saying that they're not special sounds wrong, I think, but in that, like, they're just humans. And that, you know, if you put them on a pedestal, like anybody, you put anybody on a pedestal, you're doing a disservice to creating a good relationship with them.
If you put them on a pedestal, or like, you know, objectify them and see them in a different way, you can have no problems moving in,
because you're not really seeing them as they truly are, and you're doing a disservice to them because you're giving them expectations that may not be able to meet, right.
But also, don't date anyone, you know, and I certainly have my own issues and problems, but, like, you know, just dating someone for a long time that may not be a healthy relationship. Yeah. And it's weird how we don't see it at times, and to be smart about it. Talk to your friends about it, you know, because sometimes your friends know more than you do when you're inside that relationship.
Yeah, I was actually at my wedding. One of my best friends was like, I like you with your wife because you're able to be you, as opposed to this other woman I was with for 10 years. And he always said when she was around, you acted like a different person. I was like, why didn't you tell me this like 5 years ago? Wow, I was dating that girl.
Right. But like, think about that. That's 10 years we fail to see it. I've been in really too. We just failed to acknowledge, like, you know, it's like you got blinders on.
Yeah, that was actually my cousin's best piece of advice. I remember my cousin's older than me, and she's like probably the smartest person I know. But she came to me and said, you know, what you have right now is not love. It's just it's like a drug, because it's when it was really awesome, it was really awesome, and when it's not awesome, it's totally not awesome.
You're always trying to get it to that awesome place, and
and
it's just a roar. The drama, like drama in a relationship is not a good relationship.
Yeah. And she was like, she was like, a good relationship's like a steady, like, just upward climb, but not crazy, right? It's not crazy up, it's not crazy down. It's just kind of
Nancy, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you know, when you kind of think about love, you think about relationships, you think like that drug is so addictive when it's great, you know, because I was like, I mean, when it was great, it was great. But when it sucked, it was really shitty, you know? And I think that, like, to me, that had a lot to do with relationships and just my life. Like, I had a really interesting childhood in terms of relationships. My dad was dying. My mom was working. It was, you know, very.
Oh yeah,
it was a very challenging time for me to be able to like create relationships. And I mean, that's the one difference between me and my son also, is that, you know, when I was growing up, my dad was sick. So me and my dad could never create a really like relationship where we're on an even plane. Whereas at least my son gets to see me in my best place, and he's able to kind of, like, I could at least like show him things about being an adult, about being a man, being an adult. But I usually end these episodes with kind of one advice about kind of any general advice you'd like to give my son. If not, that's cool. But if you have any kind of general advice you want to give that we haven't talked about, do you have anything?
Just try to be mindful of other people, but also be an advocate for yourself.
That's great. I like that. The thing I keep telling my son always is, don't be the cause of other people's therapy.
Oh, yeah. Fuck! I've been in those love relationships,
and that's me and my wife. Our goal as a parent is that whatever we do isn't going to cause our son's therapy. He could go to therapy for other shit, but not because of his mom and dad. So no matter what we do, that's our number one thing, is we don't want to be the cause of his therapy. And so that's what I tell him too.
Because you're going to be the cause of it, no matter what you think. Yeah. But you don't want to be the darker, the
bad causes of therapy. But I think in relationships, and I think like in dealing with other people, you know, especially in relationships, but just don't be the reason that somebody else has to go to therapy, that you're such an asshole, or that you're so you know, just a jerk. And the other thing similar to that, and I haven't said this in a while for piece of advice, so this is like something I always tell them, is that, you know, everybody is replaceable in your life, but that also means you're replaceable. So, when it comes to relationships, that means that the girl that you're dating has to treat you well enough, because if she doesn't, then she's replaceable. But that also means you can't be an asshole, because you yourself are replaceable too, right?
Yeah.
That she could find somebody better than you or as good as you. But I think that's important that, we always think that these people are so special that we can't replace them in our lives. And that's when we get all crazy. But in reality, everyone's replaceable,
That's and especially when you get replaced, it's really important to assess and take responsibility for what you did wrong. And that's really hard because we're hurt. And so our knee-jerk reaction is to blame and be angry at everybody.
Yeah. Well,
and it's really important to take some kind of sense of personal accountability, how you kind of, wrecked, it may have been shipwrecked everything.
Yeah. And also vice versa, right? That person doesn't have the right to treat you like an ass, like be a dick to you, because ultimately there's another person out there who's as good as that person is, that you have the right, that they shouldn't be able to treat you badly. But how can people follow you, Kim? How can people follow your work? How can people follow what you're up to?
You could go to Instagram, just go to Kim Noonan, KIMNOONAN. You could just Google me and you could see a lot of my short films, some won awards.
Do you have a website?
I just took it down, so I'm reconstructing it right now.
Okay.
So they could but all the stuff is on YouTube.
Okay. So I'll put
a website right at this point.
I'll put a link for everybody for his YouTube and his Instagram, so you guys can follow him as well. So thank you, Kim.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you everybody for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe to this podcast. And please, if you guys have time, please also join us on the other podcast, Best or Worst Pod and Midnight Watchers. Best or Worst is we ask people about the best and worst moments of their lives. Midnight Watchers, me and my partners, Quentin Lee and Jennifer Field, we review and take a look at classic midnight movies. So in kind of horror, crazy movies. Most of the movies I don't like, by the way. I'm just going to put that out there. And then the last thing I'm going to mention before we close is that I do have a new screenwriting course on Udemy, and it is a 4.5 hour class where you can learn about screenwriting and from me, and it is as fun and exciting. It'll take you from idea to finished script. Right now, but by the time this comes out, it'll be a different price. But regular price is $19.99. But check it out. Come to my website. You'll see a different price, probably $12.99. All right. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everybody. Peace out, guys.